Hello. Okay, great. Thank you, Brenda, for that welcoming introduction. Oh, yeah, thank you. I do need these. So as Brenda mentioned, my name is Aden Asefa, and I am the Drug Trials Snapshots lead. And for today's talk, I will be talking about diversity in clinical trials from the Drug Trial Snapshots perspective. Okay. So for today, we'll go over the importance to increase diversity in clinical studies, FDA's initiative to increase diversity in drug development program, and an overview of the Drug Trial Snapshots program, as well as the most recent findings from the 2023 annual report. So why is it important to increase diversity in clinical studies? Adequate representations of patients with disease or condition of interest from diverse U.S. populations may help to generate data reflective of the diverse U.S. populations in drug, biologic, and device development programs. Potentially identify differences in safety efficacy outcomes. Incorporate diverse patient voices and experiences of various parts of the U.S. Build trust among patients. Provide a more comprehensive studying about the disease or condition, and improve health equity and access to clinical research and innovative treatments. So first, I want to go over some statutory requirements to increase diversity in drug development. We'll start with the 1998 demographic rule, where FDA issued a final rule requiring presentation of effectiveness and safety data by age, gender, race, and when appropriate subgroup from the intended population, such as renal failure, for marketing applications. And in 2012, the FDA Safety and Innovation Act, FDASIA, directed FDA to investigate how well the demographic subgroups by sex, race, age, and ethnicity were included in clinical trials, and approve labeling for medical product applications to improve the availability of data to the public. And then in 2014, FDA formulated a 5-year action plan designated to boost the clinical trial participation by women, minorities, and older adults. And this 5-year action plan required FDA to work with stakeholders and standardize subgroup categories to improve the quality of subgroup analysis in new drug applications, which led to the implementation of the Drug Trial Snapshot program in 2015. And then finally, the 2022 Clinical Trial Diversity and Modernization under the Food and Drug Omnibus Reform Act was most recently with the most recent implementation of the diversity action plans. And then I'm just going to go over some FDA guidance documents that are addressing the diversity inclusion in the clinical studies. So collection of race and ethnicity data in clinical trials, that guidance was issued on October 2016. The evaluation of reporting of age, race, and ethnicity specific data in medical device clinical studies issued September 2017. The evaluation of sex-specific data in medical device clinical studies, guidance for the industry and FDA staff, which was issued August 2014. And in 2016, FDA issued new recommendations to industry to the collection of race, ethnicity, in clinical trials. And with respect to women and sex-specific considerations, the post-approval pregnancy safety studies issued on May 2019, as well as the clinical lactation studies, and pregnant women scientific ethical considerations for inclusion in clinical trials was issued on April 2018. And for age group considerations, inclusion of older adults in cancer trials issued on March 2022, E7 studies in support of special populations, the geriatric population in 1994, and ethical considerations of clinical investigations of medical products involving children on September 2022. And then finally, enhancing clinical trial diversity, the enhancing the diversity clinical trial populations, the eligibility criteria, enrollment practices, and trial designs issued on November 2020. And then most recently, the draft diversity plans to improve enrollment of participation from underrepresented racial and ethnic populations in clinical trials that was most recently issued on April 2022. So for the remainder of the talk, I'm just going to be focusing on the Drug Trial Snapshot program. I am not an expert to any of the therapeutic areas that I will be discussing in my talk today. So in 2012, FDA Safety and Innovation Act, FDASIA 907, was enacted to require FDA to report on diversity of participants in clinical trials and the extent to which safety and effectiveness data are based on demographic factors such as sex, race, age, and ethnicity. The Drug Trials Snapshots program was implemented in 2015 in part of FDA's response to the action plan Section 907 of FDASIA with 3 overarching priorities: to improve the completeness and quality of demographic subgroup data collection, reporting, and analysis, to identify barriers to subgroup enrollment in clinical trials, and to employ strategies and to encourage greater participation, and an overall effort to make demographic subgroup data more available and transparent. So Drug Trial Snapshots provides consumers and healthcare professionals with information about who participated in key clinical trials that support the FDA approval of the new drugs. They are only published for approved new molecular entities, NMEs, and original biologics, BLAs, which are medications that are made of new molecular structures that have not been approved by the FDA before. And demographic composition and the resulting analysis by the age, gender, race, and ethnicity in pivotal key clinical studies for FDA-approved medical products would be made available on the FDA website. And the race categories are defined from the OMB standards for maintaining, collecting, and presenting federal data on race and ethnicity. The information also highlights the trials, where the trials were conducted, and whether there were any differences in benefits or side effects amongst the different demographic groups. So this is just an example of what's actually in the Drug Trial Snapshots database. As you can see, the brand name or the drug name is on the left, and there are hundreds of drug trial snapshots, some individual drug trial snapshot summaries in this database. And I have also provided the link below. So this is an outline of what's actually in a drug trial snapshot. Consumer information is presented first. How is the drug used what is the drug used for and how is it used? Followed by the information about the clinical trials, who participated in the clinical trials, including the number of participants, number of sites and countries, followed by the trial design, baseline demographic data, which includes sex, race, age, and ethnicity. And this is obtained from, and this is usually presented in table and pie chart format. And then the benefit and side effects of the drug, which is from the FDA review. And then lastly, participation in clinical trials report, which report information on clinical trial participants by site location over the 2-year timeframe. And then the most recent 2023 annual report was recently published on May 14, 2023. So for the most recent 2023 Drug Trial Snapshot Annual Report, CDER approved 55 novel therapies for a broad range of diseases, with more than half approved for rare diseases. And about 44,000 study participants contributed through their participation in these pivotal trials. So I've included a section from the most recent 2023 annual report for the therapeutic area, infectious diseases. And then, as you can see, I was given an example, Beyfortus, the indication to prevent respiratory RSV, lower respiratory tract disease, had about 2,943 participants in the trials. 48% were female, 62.7% were white, 23% Black, 2.3% Asian, 15.9% were of Hispanic ethnicity. And then it looks like for this drug program, they adjusted for age for below 6 months, since it's a pediatric drug. 12.1% of the population was below 6 months, and then 24.5% of the participants were in the US. And then comparable to DEF and CANT, it looks like 100% of the US participants were in the US. So another table in the 2023 DTS Annual Summary Report, this presents percent participation in trials in therapeutic area of reproductive, urologic, and the rare metabolic diseases. And as you can see, the drug Elfabrio and Lamzi, they have asterisks near their name, which indicates the rare disease. And this year we had a little bit more than half of the approvals for the treatment for rare orphan diseases. Lamzede, a drug to treat non-central nervous system manifestations of alpha-acidosis, had no participants in the clinical trials within the US, as well as no Black or Asians in the clinical trials with Hispanic information just not available. And the drug Veozah to treat moderate to severe hot flashes caused by menopause had only females in the trials with 81% white, 17% Black, 1% Asians participating in the trial. And also, we included pie charts that reflect programs enrolling both males and females, excluding sex-specific indications for each therapeutic area, which I'll talk more about in my next slide. So the 2023 annual summary report, the percentage of females participating in these drug programs range from 41 to 67%. For participation by sex, we summarized data for programs enrolling both males and females, excluding sex-specific indications, for example, prostate cancer or postpartum depression, as their inclusion would impact interpretability of equitable participation by sex trials for these diseases that affect both sexes. So I won't go into each of these, but as you can see, there are 4 therapeutic areas and 3 on this slide enrolled more males and females, with infectious diseases almost equal enrollment. And on this slide, 3 of the therapeutic enrolled more females than males, noting the biggest difference of the therapeutic area was in neurologic and psychiatric disorders, with 67% females and 33% males. So some additional race findings from our report: whites comprise more than 50% of the trial populations enrolled for all programs except for 3. Asians comprise the second largest race category, with 6 drug programs enrolling over 30% Asians. 2 programs enrolled over 25% Blacks, and then 5 drug programs enrolled over 30% Hispanics. And unfortunately, we did not report any data in the report of American Indian or Alaskan Native race category. Historically, the numbers have been very low, but under 1 to 2%, or just not available. So all of the pivotal trials supporting each of the novel therapy approvals were conducted at multiple sites, and majority were multinational. Percent of the participants within the US range from 0.4 to 82%, with 5 drug programs conducted entirely in the US: DEBUT, Defencath, Miebo, Xemvi, and Zezafret. And then 2 drug programs enrolled participants entirely outside the US. So from 2015 to 2020, DTS annual summary reports provided aggregate data on demographics of the study population. And in 2021, we started to provide demographic data of study population by individual drug program. And it's important to remember that no prevalence information of the disease or medical condition targeted by the approved drug was provided as a benchmark. The interpretation of the racial and ethnic composition of study population across the novel therapies should consider the prevalence of the disease within each of these racial and ethnic subgroups. And then in my next slide, my colleagues and I, we actually did compare prevalence data of multiple sclerosis with the last 5 drug programs that were approved, and enrolling a study population in a drug development program that is representative of a patient population in the US requires an understanding of the epidemiology and the demographic characteristics of that disease or medical condition. So in this case, multiple sclerosis, it's a chronic autoimmune inflammatory demyelinating disease of the central nervous system that affects an estimated 744,781 adults in the US and is the leading cause of disability in young adults. And 5 therapies were approved for MS between 2017 and 2023. And then baseline demographics and race ethnicity is displayed on this slide. So as you can see, the prevalence data of US patients with MS by sex, race, age, and ethnicity is presented on the first half of the slide. And we compare that to the baseline demographics of race and ethnicity on the bottom half. So the first row is all sites, second row is US sites, and the third is non-US sites. And so as you can see, the x-axis, you see the racial categories, and each of the bar graphs are the MS drugs that was approved on that year. Oservis was the light blue in 2017, Mazenet 2019, Zeposia in 2020, Ponvory 2021, and Brumovy in 2022. And then we compared it to the prevalence data, and then that red line is actually what you see. That's the prevalence data of MS for that racial category. So what we found across all 5 programs, the percentage of female patients enrolled across all sites, about 60 to 67%, was similar between US and non-US sites, and slightly below the US prevalence at 76%. And in terms of race, enrollment of Asian patients in the MS programs was below US prevalence, below 2%, with the exception of Mazenet at all sites and non-US sites, and 3 programs enrolled no Asian patients in the US. And the enrollment of Black patients at the US sites, around between 6 to 21%, approximated or exceeded US prevalence of MS, whereas the enrollment of non-US sites between 0 to 0.5% was lower than compared to the US prevalence at 10%. Across MS programs, enrollment of white patients at all sites exceeded the US prevalence of this race group. And approximately 7% of the MS patients in the US are Hispanic or Latino. The percentage of Hispanic Latino patients enrolled varied across the programs. And in general, the US sites enrolled a higher percentage of Hispanic patients, by 15%, that approximated the US prevalence. So presenting demographic data by drug therapeutic area in the annual summaries will help track trends and diversity over time. It's important to identify programs that have achieved lower or greater enrollment of underrepresented patient populations. And in conclusion, efforts across many years and by multiple stakeholders have led to improvements to enroll diverse study populations in some therapeutic areas, and opportunities for improvement still need to be identified and addressed. And external engagement and open dialogue about knowledge gaps, underrepresentation, challenges, approaches are important to ensure diversity in drug development programs. And in summary, it's important to generate data reflective of the US population in drug, biologic, and device development programs. Drug Trial Snapshot program is FDA's overall effort to make demographic subgroup data more available and transparent. Interpretation of racial and ethnic composition of these study populations across the novel therapies approved should consider the prevalence of the disease, and opportunities for improvement still need to be identified and addressed. And in closing, I have a quote. I think it's very, it relates to the Drug Trial Snapshot. The way we work in public health is we make the best recommendations, decisions based on the best available data. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Aden. So we're going to do, am I out of minutes for questions?
Well,
okay, we have a good amount of time for questions here. Need I ask any questions in the house? Okay, we will then continue with.
I had some poll questions.
Someone?
I had some poll questions. I don't
Oh, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
I didn't know if you're okay. So one of my poll questions was the Drug Trial Snapshots program was in response to which FDA statutory requirement? Is it A, the 1998 demographic rule, B, the 2022 clinical trial diversity and modernization under the Food and Drug Omnibus, the FDORA Act, or the 2012 Section 907 of FDA Safety and Innovation Act, FDASIA, or all the above? All the above, you said? No. Yes, it's C. And then my second poll question is the drug trial snapshots are available for all drugs, devices, and biologics approved by the FDA, true or false? Yes, it's false. It's only for drugs and it's only for novel therapies. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you guys for answering, audibly. It's good to have that type of energy in the room. Oh, we got somebody. Good to have that type of energy in the room. Okay, let's take the question in-house, please.
Thank you. Thank you for your talk. And I'm really glad to see that this is happening. My name is Maria Waracha from UC San Diego. And one of my main focuses there is on diversity and patient outreach. So I've seen and throughout the research, 50% kind of the average for other white
Mhm.
to be part of the clinical trials. But is there something with the INDs that CDER is looking for or to encourage or recommend for the outreach? Because, obviously we can't say, oh, it's difficult to get uh, patients of minority background into clinical trials, but um, just looking to see what else is being done. I mean,
Mhm.
it's great to provide the numbers, but what actions are actively being taken to put us on onus to go out and really try and increase that diversity in clinical trials?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, FDA isn't a regulatory agency, and so, actually, the drug trial snapshot is a really good way to boost those numbers because it is transparent. So, patients and consumers they see this data, and also the recent legislation that's requiring sponsors to submit diversity action plans, which, as a result, that's going to have in turn sponsors submit data that's reflective of the U.S. population in these drug trials. And then we do have like certain offices that do fund certain studies. I think it's the Office of Minority Health and Equity that do helps fund studies that are of underserved communities.
Thank you. Next in-house question, please.
Hi, Yang Wong. I'm from EMD Serrano. Thank you so much for this presentation on a very timely and important topic. We all know that the FDA diversity action plans are a big priority for the agency. So one of my questions for you is, do you anticipate using some of the snapshots data to further help support, you know, discussions and feedback surrounding how sponsors are getting, their diversity action plans, whether they're meeting
Yeah.
enrollment goals?
Well, as you know, it is separate, a different timeline in the drug development program. However, I do sit in those meetings, and so my experiences in reporting this data, I do bring that experience to, our implementation on what is being required in the diversity action plan. So, it's related in a sense, and it's transparent, and so we try to encourage collaboration with those initiatives.
If I may, just a real quick follow-up to that. One of the things that I really think I have to compliment you guys on is the separation now of US versus global in the summary reports. I think that's very helpful.
Yeah.
And it'll be a, I think, ongoing topic of conversation as we get more multi-regional clinical trials and more involved in kind of this diversity conversation.
Oh, thank you. That was actually at the request of Dr. Caleb, so that was something he wanted us to capture. Thanks.
Thank you.
As a reminder, when you do the survey, please put your comments such as this. If you have negative comments, we'll take that too. But we'll take any positive comments, any suggestions that you would like to see, or anything you thought was exceptionally done well and of great significance to you in your responsibilities. Please put some notes there for us, please, so we can get some idea of the impact that we've had upon the audience. Okay, online question, please.
The snapshot provides an overview of race/ethnicity and other demographic breakdown. However, how do we ensure that this is reflective of the population of interest or reflective of the epidemiology and balance it with clinical trial recruitment timeline and completion of the trial to bring drugs to patients with high unmet need?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the Drug Trial Snapshots program's purpose is just to report on the data that we're seeing in the clinical trials. So, it's not compared to any prevalence information, but, the data is available to the public. And for what my colleagues and we've done, and anyone that is welcome to do this as well, is compare the enrollment of different racial categories in these trials with the prevalence data of certain medical conditions. For example, what I did earlier with multiple sclerosis.
Thank you. Next question, please.
The demographic data in drug trial snapshots appear to be for the globally enrolled population. Are there plans to share enrollment demographics for just the US population enrolled in a study, or does FDA expect that the population enrolled in the global study should reflect the US treatment population?
Yeah, so I mean, so this year was the first year that we actually did break down the percentage of participation in the US, and that was the reason why. Before we never really captured that, and so before we just did race, the other demographic factors. And so the first step to, finding more about, the outside versus the inside US is starting to report the percentage of US enrollment. Again, that could be done with additional research. However, right now, we're just reporting with participation in the US and the racial and sex and age demographic factors.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Do you have information on the number of diversity plans that have been submitted since the release of the guidance, and what types of programs trigger the FDA to request a diversity plan?
So I actually don't have any information on diversity action plans. Sorry, this is only the Drug Trial Snapshots program. I knew I was going to get that question.
Okay, next online question, please.
What are some of the biggest barriers that explain such underrepresentation of minorities?
Well, I think it's very complicated, and there's many. It could be location, it could be health equity, it could be standard of care, and it could be lack of trust. I mean, there's so many issues of lack of, and then also, one thing I've noticed when I was doing this is that a lot of the drug programs, they kind of follow each other from the previous years. For example, with MS, they tend to do this certain the same amount of enrollment outside the U.S. versus inside the U.S. And so when they do that, they're not really changing the diversity of their clinical trial. So I think a lot of it is just strategies from these companies on enrolling diverse patients.
Okay, do we have any more online?
Yes, we can do another online. With AI integration, will it help issues like this? How would it help break any barriers with diversity?
I'm sure it will. That is something that we haven't had talks about yet. I'm sure industry has, but I'm pretty sure the AI, especially with the communication efforts of enrollment of diverse patients, will definitely help.
Let's take two more online, please.
Diversity plans are currently recommended as per the guidance. Is it anticipated that inclusion of these plans will eventually be required with INDs and BLAs, et cetera?
Yeah, so I'm sorry I can't answer anything related to the diversity action plans.
Okay.
Out of my
so-
scope.
All right, so let's take two more online questions, please.
Okay. If mixed ethnicity, white/non-Hispanic, and white/Hispanic parentage, is there data for that inclusion? Is ethnicity self-reported? Sorry, that's the first part of the question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I can't hear. What did
Sorry,
you-
Can you repeat,
first
please?
part of the question is ethnicity self-reported, aka if mixed ethnicity, is there data for inclusion?
Yes, it's self-reported. And so that's also challenging with other countries that don't recognize race. So that could also be a reason why you see race categories that are not available.
Last question, please.
Recently revised Statistical Policy Directive number 15 now recommends using one combined question for race and ethnicity and encourages respondents to select as many options as apply to how they identify. How will these revisions impact FDA's expectations for collection and reporting of race and ethnicity data in clinical trials, subsequently drug trial snapshots data?
Yeah, so eventually that's going to make the drug trial snapshots reporting of race and ethnicity a little bit more expansive, which is good. However, we don't have any like near future plans on reporting these new categories, race categories, or race and ethnicity standards. However, I'm sure that's something that will be in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.